Greetings, everyone. My name is Monalisa Hazarika, and I am the Research and Strategic Engagement Officer here at the Scrap Weapons Project. On behalf of the team, it is my privilege to moderate today's webinar on nuclear winter and the theory of deterrence. The second in its series, this webinar seeks to initiate a critical dialogue on the broader long-term consequences of nuclear war in a post-treaty world. And the session brings together world-renowned scientific expertise with new data-driven research to challenge the current strategic paradigms. Joining us today is a distinguished panel of experts who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience to this critical discussion. Professor Alan Robock, Distinguished Professor in the Department of Environmental Science at Rutgers University, will present his extensive research on the catastrophic environmental impacts of nuclear weapons. Professor Dan Plesch will critically examine the extent to which nuclear war planning among nuclear armed states account for these risks and debunk the traditional frameworks of nuclear deterrence. And bridging the gap between science and policy, the Scrap Weapons Project Assistant Eleonora Olivari will present findings from her bibliographical trend analysis, which maps how academic and policy interests in deterrence and nuclear winter has fluctuated, and will identify where these two fields overlap or perhaps dangerously fail to acknowledge one another. Before I pass the floor to our speakers, I wanted to inform and encourage you to please use the chat function to communicate your thoughts and ideas with your fellow participants, of course, keeping it respectful and professional, and the Q&A feature to submit your questions to our panelists, which we will be taking on after their presentations. Our project assistant, Ariana Riccia, will be monitoring the Q&A function, so if you have any questions at any stage of today's webinar, please submit them there. With that, I would now like to turn it over to Professor Robock for the first presentation. Please, the floor is yours.
Hi, thank you very much for your interest in my work. I want to talk, you can see my screen, hear me?
Yes.
Yes, okay, good. I want to talk about global famine after nuclear war. If there was a nuclear war, oh wait. Oh yeah, here's our beautiful planet, but after a nuclear war, it might look like this, with a cloud of smoke covering the northern hemisphere caused by the fires in cities and industrial areas that would be ignited by the nuclear attacks. If there was enough smoke, it would block out so much sun that it would get below freezing even in the summertime, and we call that nuclear winter. It would be cold, there'd be less precipitation, it'd be dark, more UV because the ozone would be destroyed, and this would be a terrible impact on our agriculture, on food, which is the most important impact of climate change. So let me explain how that would happen. Paul Crutzen and John Birks wrote an article in 1982 in a Swedish journal Ambio about what would happen after a nuclear war. And they were concerned with ozone, which is a photochemical reaction. And they said, there would be fires and there would be smoke. And their article was called The Atmosphere After a Nuclear War, Twilight at Noon. And they said, that might cause climate change. We don't know what. We have to run climate models to do it. So two groups, an American group, Turco Toon, Ackerman, Pollack, and Sagan, published a paper called Nuclear Winter in 1983. And Alexander Ofen-Stenchikov in Russia also did a climate model simulation, and both of them got the same answer, that temperatures would get below freezing and there would be nuclear winter. Here's a graph of the number of nuclear weapons in the world, and you see there was a nuclear arms race, and it went up, and then the arms race ended and the number went down. And so there are actually 9 nations. These are the 2 with the most weapons, and more than 90%. Why did the arms race end? Well, I think we scientists had something to do with it. The Crutzen and Birks paper was published in 1982. Taps and Alexander Ofen-Stenchikov in 1983. There was another group at the National Center for Atmospheric Research, and I also published a paper, and then the arms race ended. So how do we try and support that? Oh, by the way, there's another theory. It was the end of the Soviet Union, but the Soviet Union didn't end for another 5 years. That was after the arms race was over. And by the way, the number is not zero. Although it went down from over 60,000 to about 10,000 deployed weapons, it hasn't been going down, and now there's that the New START treaty ended a couple weeks ago, we're afraid that there'll be a new nuclear arms race. So how do we do this research? Well, we just asked the people that made the decision. Ronald Reagan, US president, said a great many reputable scientists are telling us such a war could end up in no victory for anyone because we wipe out the earth as we know it. Think back to natural calamities, volcanoes. There was a snow in July in many temperate countries, of the year without a summer. Now, if one volcano can do that, what are we talking about? The nuclear winter. It's possible. And Gorbachev, the other one that made the decision, running the Soviet Union, models made by Russian American scientists showed that a nuclear war would result in a nuclear winter that would be extremely destructive to all life on Earth. The knowledge is a great stimulus to us. There are 7 more nuclear states. I've changed the axis. This goes up to 600, not 60,000. And the green one is China. They're increasing their arsenal. The blue and orange are France and UK. India and Pakistan are increasing their numbers. This is Israel, and this is North Korea. So several countries are still increasing their arsenals. Now, why do nations have nuclear weapons? They claim that they don't want to attack people with it. They just want them for deterrence. But the problem is this is a flawed theory. First of all, deterrence doesn't work against non-nuclear threats. And also, if it did work, it have to work perfectly forever. There can be any case where it could fail. And it also turns out that if one country attacks the other with nuclear weapons, say the US attacks Russia, we'd all die from famine from the climate effects. So for deterrence to work, they have to believe that we would be suicide bombers, that we would be willing to kill ourselves to deter. So it's a very flawed theory. Brian Toon and I actually wrote a paper about that, self-assured destruction, the climatic impacts of nuclear war, showing that one country would destroy themselves if they used them. Now, there have been many examples of nuclear nations being attacked by non-nuclear nations, and the nuclear nations did not deter the attack or action. So the Soviets took over Eastern Europe. The US had nuclear weapons. That didn't deter them. Israel was attacked in the Yom Kippur War. Britain was attacked in the Falkland Islands by Argentina. Afghanistan beat the Soviet Union and the US. In Vietnam, our nuclear weapons didn't help. The terrorists attacked us in 9/11. Hamas attacked Israel a few years ago, and Ukraine even attacked Russia and during their current war, but their nuclear arsenal didn't deter them. They said, "Oh, no, no, that's not what we meant. We meant deterrence against other nuclear states." And it's true, except for some small wars between India and Pakistan, which did not go nuclear. Nuclear states have not attacked each other, but why? Was it deterrence or was it something else? Maybe it was just a general decline in violence, international number of democracies, international organizations. But also, it has to work forever. It can't fail. I took this picture in Havana. This is a Soviet rocket, a model. There were 36 of them snuck into Cuba by the Soviet Union in 1962. This one had a megaton warhead, 77 times more powerful than the bomb which devastated Hiroshima. When the U.S. discovered that, they told the Russians to remove them, and they didn't. And so we set up a blockade around Cuba. And October 27th, 1962 is now commonly referred to as Black Saturday. Several horrible things happened. First of all, a U-2 spy plane was shot down over Cuba on that day. And I had a Cuban student, Juan Carlos Antuña, working with me in the United States. I took him to the Air and Space Museum in Washington, which had a U-2 spy plane repurposed as for Earth observations in the gallery. He said, "I've seen one of those before." What? How could you have seen one? Well, in Havana, they saved the rocket engine from that U-2 spy plane they shot down and put it on display in a park in Havana. And this is a mock-up of the Russian missile that shot it down. And then there was a Soviet submarine off the coast of America, and the U.S. was putting depth charges on it to try to get it to surface. And 2 of the admirals wanted to launch what was a secret nuclear torpedo. Vasily Arkhipov said, "No, you can't launch it." He won the first Future of Life award for people who have saved the world and for preventing a nuclear war then. There have been other other close calls. There's a whole list of them. I just want to talk about a couple. A radar malfunction in Russia looked like the U.S. was attacking Russia, and Stanislav Petrov said, "I don't think that's right," and he didn't launch a nuclear war. He got the second Future of Life Award. So India and Pakistan have had come close to nuclear war. But how many other incidents were there that were kept secret? How much longer will our luck hold out? Luck is not a good strategy. So I just wanted to say, although the Cold War and its nuclear arms race are over, could the remaining nuclear arsenal still produce nuclear winter? The answer is yes. It would kill most of humanity. What would be the consequences of the use of a much smaller number? Well, if India and Pakistan had a nuclear war, it wouldn't be nuclear winter. Temperatures wouldn't get below freezing, but it would be a horrible impact on agriculture. I see my time's running out, so I just want to fast forward to what would be the impacts of uh, on agriculture. So we've done simulations of different numbers of nuclear weapons. A US-Russia attack, 150 teragrams of smoke, India-Pakistan, various amounts. It doesn't matter whether it's India, Pakistan, or any other countries producing this amount of smoke. This is how global temperature would change. It would go 5 degrees Celsius below normal, which is the same as during the Ice Age, but it would last for a decade. A US-Russia war would produce more. And so how would nuclear war affect agriculture? It would be dark, cold, and less rainfall. And so we wrote a paper a couple years ago on what would happen to food, calculating the amount of food being able to be produced in every country around the world and looking at diets. And we had these scenarios, different amounts of smoke, teragram is 1,000,000 tons, different number of weapons, different size weapons, and this amount of smoke. And in that case, uh, over crops, there would be even more cooling because the figure I showed you before was including the oceans. It would also affect fish. And so for a 37 teragram amount of smoke, this is a graph showing the number of people that would starve after a year because after they up their food. And at high latitudes, most people in Canada and Scandinavia would die. Most people in Russia would die. If there was a war between the US and Russia, most people in the world would die. These are all the countries where almost everybody would starve to death. There are a few places, Argentina and Australia, where there aren't very many people and a lot of they produce a lot of food, but they wouldn't have diesel fuel or ways to store their food, so they might not even be that well off, and there'd be flotillas of hungry people arriving at their shores. So if we look at the number of direct fatalities from these number of weapons, 52 million people, 127 million people, 360 million people, it would be horrific. But if there was a nuclear war, it would be more than 10 times that number of people would die. A US-Russia war could kill most of Earth's population. So I just wanted to end with, well, actually, let me just show you. Those are all climate model simulations. Let me talk about a couple analogs. Ronald Reagan mentioned the Tambora eruption, 1815, which produced a year without a summer. And indeed, it caused cooling. Gillen Wood said for 3 years following Tambora's explosion, to be alive almost anywhere in the world meant to be hungry. There was famine in the U.S., in Europe, in China. This is a graph of the temperature at New Haven, Connecticut, show how cold it got for a couple years. Now, the other example is what killed the dinosaurs. This is a layer which had iridium and smoke from fires and little pieces of rock. And Brian Toon and I wrote this book called Earth in Flames, uh, how an asteroid killed the dinosaurs, how we can escape a similar fate from nuclear winter. So a friend of mine, Linda Williams, wrote a song about it. Let me play a little bit of it. Oops. So I thought that was a very good way of framing it. We are the asteroid, we are the dinosaurs. This is a problem that we created, and we would kill ourselves, but we could save it. So a current arsenal can produce nuclear winter. It would kill most of humanity, and it's up to us to solve that problem. Thanks. I could go on, but we need other talks.
Thank you, Professor Robock, for your very detailed presentation. I understand it's very difficult to squeeze everything into 10 minutes, but your question on how long will luck be on our side, and we are the asteroid, we are the dinosaur analogy surely is a good food for thought for our audience joining us today. With that, I would now like to move on to a second speaker, Professor Dan Plesch. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mona Lisa, and thank you very much, Alan. I've had the honor to be at a international conference, the Pugwash conference in Hiroshima a few months ago. And back in the day, as they say, I was aware of nuclear winter. And it was a key part of the campaigns that helped end the Cold War, that's for sure. But it really was a, what do they call it, the ice bucket challenge moment, listening to Alan in Hiroshima as a shock to the system. And oh my, yeah, I'd forgotten all about that. And there is at the moment so much loose talk about deterrence, about armaments. There's no attention at all to arms control and disarmament. The last treaties have been put through the shredder, and there's no constituency. And we're going to hear from Eleonora Olivari in a moment, and I don't know her findings. This will be fresh to me and to you, but she just started looking at this because here we are in our ivory tower of the university, and there are university departments devoted to deterrent studies, and I'm external at some other universities, and the awareness of risk. What are we really talking about here? In these conflicts, whether it's, oh, well, things might go wrong in the South China Sea, or things will go even worse with Ukraine, and there's nuclear saber rattling, and Putin comes out with his new doomsday machines. But there's no real public awareness of what risks we are running. And nowadays, in the study which I've done with Manuel Galileo, which it did get 2 pages in the Sun newspaper here and other news, that there's now a blending of nuclear and non-nuclear weapons. This happened on the battlefield with this image behind Mona Lisa and Ariana of an atomic bomb fired from a cannon. That was a feature of the Cold War, and these were the same cannons that were used to fire normal high explosive shells. But now that blending of nuclear and conventional exists at the strategic level. And this is even more dangerous, but no public attention at all. And it occurred to me, having come back from Hiroshima, that we should try and start a dialogue and an engagement on the topic. And going forward, the nuclear weapon states, and by the way, we shouldn't include the UK as a nuclear weapon state. It just broadly rents them from America. It has no independent capacity. And the breach with Trump and the potential breach with the US and NATO has finally brought this reality home to US policymakers, I think. But leaving that to one side, the nuclear weapon states, every year, they play nuclear war games. And at least in the NATO circle, they bring in the politicians. We know from the historical records that when these exercises happen, prime ministers, presidents, defense secretaries are in the room, and they're asked, well, what do we do now? The Russians have done such and such, or we have this such a threat from China. Do we go nuclear? And I think we'll try and do, and anyone listening wants to participate, we welcome that, is to bring into the public debate, well, Prime Minister, you're going to be going into the bunker to make these decisions. Are you really aware of what's at stake? And use this as an opportunity to engage with with media and policymakers alike. So this discussion that we're beginning here today is part of opening up that discussion. It's not the end. It's a start of a dialogue. And I think one of the points for us as academics is that academics, produce libraries on deterrence. But certainly in my experience, the discussion is remote, rarefied from consequences. There's a downplaying of risks. There's a downplaying of the role of luck. There's a downplaying of even some of the past incidents. Oh, they weren't so bad. And within those texts, there's no assessment of what the consequences are. When people say, well, Putin is threatening a nuclear war, or we should retaliate, this isn't really presented in the context of consequences. And when I say, well, hear a little bit more from Eleonora, her findings may show that what I'm saying is nonsense. That may be completely integrated. We'll find out. But I think that's a way, if there is this cognitive dissonance, I think, in the jargon, then I think we collectively and individually can just start to go and question, to interview the leading proponents of these academic theories and say, well, why don't you include the consequences? And open up the debate that way. And that can lead into a discussion about opening up the debate around the exercises with the Russians, Chinese, other states do them as well as the NATO countries. And that's part of our strategy. But there's a point that Arthur Peterson, our protagonist from Pugwash and UCL, also very important climate scientist, a point he made, and Alan may want to pick up on this, that he said in the introduction to the most recent UN report of the Framework Agreement on Climate Change, there had been a statement by the chair, or the introduction, which said, well, of course, climate change could happen very quickly. Not in this longer term, it could happen very quickly if there was a huge volcanic explosion. And that, I think, opens the door to us to engage with the climate science community and the climate change NGOs. Because if the annual report or the periodic report of the UNFCCC can talk about an urgent or a very short notice incident of climate change, severe climate change from a volcano, then surely it should be in the remit of the Framework Convention discussions to think about massive climate change resulting from nuclear war. And I think we may have, from this discussion, we may open this up as another strand. So that's overall what I wanted to say by way of introduction. It leads into the work that we are doing on a new initiative for an international framework for disarmament, also perhaps copied from the climate science. People talk about a COP for the climate process. Well, we're just having a discussion about what a COP for weapons might look like. And we'd encourage you to join that. And as I say, in addition to the scenarios outlined by Alan, we'd encourage you to look at our Masters of the Air paper and look what's behind these soothing phrases, blended deterrence. It feels like something you might get at Häagen-Dazs or your local shake shop. But it's talking about using nuclear weapons and conventional weapons together in strategic warfare. And this is today's reality and is unnoticed and extraordinarily destabilizing. So these are some of the elements which we bring into this debate. And I'm very interested to hear what Eleonora has unearthed. But really, again, this is an overture to further study. And we're not expecting all the answers today. It's part of a developing dialogue. And with that, I'll bring my remarks to close, and hopefully this work can perform the function of the ice bucket challenge for deterrence advocates. Thank you, Mona Lisa.
Thank you, Professor Plesch, for sharing your insights on nuclear war exercises and also opening this debate on this topic. I would now like to move on to our third speaker of the day, Ms. Eleonora Olivari. Please, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. My name is Eleonora Olivari. I'm a student, a master's student at SOAS, majoring in diplomacy and international studies. And today I would like to present you with the findings that me and my colleague Louis couldn't be here today, so I'm presenting both of our findings. The work we've done as project assistants for this beautiful project of mapping the bibliography based on JSTOR from the year 1990 to the present day, 2025, 2026. Can you see the screen? And this is the work we've done. We have mainly worked with AI tools, ChatGPT and Gemini, to map the bibliography that we have seen of articles published on JSTOR from 1990 to present day. And then we have assigned, along with AI tools, a numerical index to both subjects, deterrence index and nuclear winter index, to hopefully be able to present where they have overlapped and where they have failed to do so. And I've also made this graph to hopefully showcase it a bit better. It is clear to see that from the year of 1990 to up until 1994, 1995, during the period of reassessment in the post-Cold War and the post-AMD mutually assured destruction. The situation in the academic interest and research of the two areas was widely different. Nuclear deterrence has always maintained much more stable academic interest, while nuclear winter has declined and started declining from 1990 up until 1995, up until it has reached the moment that we have called, me and Louis have called, the silent decade, from 1995 up until 2006. During this period of time, nuclear winter seemed to have lost a bit of the academic interest that it used to have, and it has suffered a further separation from the subject of nuclear deterrence, which has also seemed to decrease in research, but has maintained a strategic place in academic research and interest. Fortunately, after 2007 up until 2014, there has been what we've called a modern renaissance in nuclear winter, spearheaded also by Alan Robock's, Oman and Stenchikov's paper, which has revisited nuclear winter with modern climate models and current nuclear arsenals of the time, and has opened the path for a more scientific-backed a conversation that kind of managed to embed itself in a more strategic nuclear deterrence related conversation, although not fully and not enough. Since 2024 up until present times, especially in 2022 with the war on Ukraine, the idea of nuclear winter has finally started overlapping a bit more than it has ever done since the 1990s, with the idea of nuclear deterrence and deterrence, strategic deterrence, although it has suffered or been subject to a terminological evolution. It is now mostly referred to as a climatic consequence to possible nuclear warfare instead of mainly nuclear winter, from what we found. But still, it's as concepts, they seem to have grown nearer than
I believe Eleonora is frozen, or is it just on my end?
No, she's frozen here too. Hope it's not a winter for her.
Yep. Perhaps. Lenora, can you hear us? Okay.
She's gone. Oh, let's hope she comes back. That's very interesting work. Do you know what the index is, what the units are?
Unfortunately,
As a
no.
supervising professor, I have no idea. I asked her if she could be interested in developing a dissertation. She said yes, and this is very much the first look at the work that she's done. So it's as fresh to you as it is to me, but I think it's extremely interesting what the initial results are.
It looks like she mentioned the paper we wrote in 2007 showing that nuclear winter was theory was validated by modern models, but it was even more interesting that the nuclear winter has been going up ever since the people realizing it, and so I'm really happy to see that people are still so. I'd like to think that we have prevented another nuclear war from happening because more and more people are aware of the consequences, but of course, there's no control for that theory.
There's no control for that, but I would say I think we talk about the end of the Cold War and these risks. In my field, in my research, was always looking at the structures and the agency. You know, who makes things happen? How do things change? And I think if you take the peace movements out of the equation in the 60s and the 80s, 90s, it's very hard to see where the agency for change and for stopping nuclear war comes from without the movements and the scientists. And one should feel heartened that we have actually saved the world so far for the teenagers to drink beer, and possibly myself too in a little while. So no sign of Eleonora.
We have
I'm
her
here.
in the call. Yep.
Oh,
I'm sorry. It seems like my Wi-Fi has given up on me.
Hello, yeah, that's good. Hello. Alan and I were just saying how interesting your work, your first initial work is.
Thank you.
So you can feel happily patronized by two old men.
Do you want to continue?
Very. I was almost done. I don't know how which part you've missed, if you've missed any, but I think I had reached the end.
What is the index? What's it a measure of it? Does it have units?
So the index, yeah, I can share it again. Hopefully it's gonna be a bit better this time. Isn't this one? Yes. Okay. So the index has been assigned with AI tools. So with the ones that we had used to also, Louis has done a similar thing. To map the bibliography, and it's based on the density of major works that we have analyzed, journal visibility, citation traction, cross-field relevance, and it was an attempt of showing a graphic way in how the two areas have overlapped and interacted with each other.
So you measured scholarly publications, but also mentions in the newspaper, in the
Yes.
and on blogs and things like social media too.
Yes.
And what does 100 mean? Can you compare that to Beyonce? Is she a million or something?
We don't really have. I guess that would be the most traction that has been brought to the analysis to the area of deterrence or nuclear winter within the space of JSTOR and within the dates that we had set. So from 1990s to the present time.
No, but I'm just trying to get an idea of how much 100 is. Is it a very small group of people somewhere, or is it a large amount, or how would you compare it to people paying attention to other things?
It's still obviously it being part of the JSTOR and the academic community, I would say it's a small number. It is not something that refers to the population at large. It's always based on academics and academic works. So unfortunately, no, I'd say it's a small number and it's not nearly sufficient to reach, as Dan was saying, the general population and the people that are not aware maybe of the dangerous failure to see where these two areas might overlap.
It seems to indicate a greater attention to nuclear winter by academics writing about deterrence than I had thought, which is good. My perhaps overcritical assumption was that very few academics writing about deterrence mention nuclear winter at all. And actually, there seems to be quite a significant overlap. Is that right?
But are these are independent, aren't they? They don't say that deterrence people pay attention to nuclear winter. It's maybe other people paying attention to nuclear winter. Is that right?
Yes, that is right. They're independent. We have kind of tried to put them. Yeah, the graph shows how they get near to each other, but not enough to actually overlap. So yes, it's more of a.
I think this is an absolutely important first step. And when we meet again, we can talk more about looking at how far the let us say the supporters of deterrence or people writing about deterrence, how far they themselves incorporate thinking about nuclear winter or not, which is, but this is a study that's going to be occupying you dissertation wise for some months. So there's no urgency to sort this out tomorrow, but it's a fascinating start to this debate, which is very much what we wanted to do today. And there may be questions we got from the audience, but there's plenty of food for thought here. And if people in the audience want to engage with us or do their own work in this area, then we would very much encourage that. And we will be having, I think, we'll be coming back. We're not finishing now, but we'll be coming back to this topic, raising the issue about how far the participants in nuclear exercises think about what the consequences are, not just the immediate consequences, but the long-term consequences. And I think following Arthur Peterson's suggestion, looking to open up the debate with the leadership in the UNFCCC about major sudden effects of climate change. But that's a great start, Eleonora. Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the places we get funding is the Future of Life Institute, which is also concerned with AI, artificial intelligence, and its dangers. And there was an article in the paper today about how there were war games played where they used not just retired generals, but AI were involved, Gemini and ChatGPT and Claude. And over 95% of the time, the AI recommended using nuclear weapons. So that just shows how dangerous these two things coming together are. The U.S. Defense Department this week is trying to strong arm a company to give them their software so they can use it in their work, and it's so flawed that's really scary too. Those things coming together.
I would bet what's the American phrase, my bottom dollar, that these AI large language model constructions don't go, well, if we make this decision, will we still be in business in 2 years' time? What will our share price look like in 2 years' time? These sorts of contextual considerations, I would hazard, are almost completely absent from these types of analysis, which are completely rarefied normally.
Yeah. But on my
Thanks.
car, I got a button that I have a Tesla that connects me to Grok, which is Elon Musk's AI. And I asked Grok about nuclear winter, and it actually got it right. It understood what the theory was, and it was able to explain it. So that gave me some hope.
Well, you may want
Thanks.
to ask questions of us, Eleonora. That's you're more than entitled, and other members of the group can also engage with us, please.
Yes, anybody have questions?
Yes. So with that, we will like to open the floor to questions from our audience. Please raise your hand if you want to take the floor to ask a question, but we already have one in the chat, which is in reference to the India-Pakistan. What critical research gap remains in understanding nuclear stability between the two countries, particularly regarding emerging technologies, doctrinal asymmetries, escalation management, and the viability of confidence building, particularly post May 2025 conflict? So if any of the speakers would like to take that.
Well, I guess that's that lands in my lap, probably. A very complex question, and I think to some extent the complexity of the question implies that the questioner knows a good deal about the subject already. Clearly, the idea that two states who are adversaries, that if they acquire nuclear weapons, then that calms everything down, and at least they have a cold peace, or they don't go to war. And that, let us say, was the working assumption of academic and military deterrence studies, and to some extent operated a bit in the US NATO Russia confrontation. But it has not applied in the India-Pakistan conflict, where there have been a number of military incidents, short wars between the two states. Now, as with every, I hate to say, call deterrence a cult, but with any self-referential system of thinking, the advocates of deterrence are quick to analyze everything and say, well, it's okay, really. And forgive me, I'm known for my cheap cracks, but it's a little like the drunk driver swerving round the corner and saying, it's all right. Look, I got round that corner okay. I know you said alcohol and driving don't mix, but look, we're still going fine. It's that kind of self-delusion which leads people to think, oh, well, if we just tweak this hotline or add this missile or get some greater understanding, then there's nothing to worry about. But one sees, I think, in both India and Pakistan, and certainly in some sections of the Indian elite, oh, we can ride out a nuclear war. You know, we have over 1 billion people, and if we lose 100 million and defeat Pakistan, then, you know, that's worth it. This kind of blithe, unthought through thinking you find all too often. And I don't want to be South Asian about this. You had similar thinking in Europe in the Cold War. So I don't know if that provides any kind of satisfactory answer to what was a very good question, but the questioner may want to say something themselves, because, as I say, it was a very sophisticated question, making me think that the questioner knew quite a lot about the subject already. Okay, thanks, Madame. But do continue to be in touch with us. And, you know, Alan and myself might well be delighted to, if you wanted in your position or wherever you are working, to join an event or webinar that anyone in the call might want to organize. We're about the beginning of a process here. And, you know, we are, as I said a number of times, very keen to join in debates, not just sit here, but join debates that other people may want to organize.
Thank you. Do we have any further questions from the audience? If so, please use the raise hand function and we can give you access. But in the meantime, I had one question that I would like to pose to the panel, which is what role can open source intelligence and public communication play in shifting how nuclear risks are understood beyond our expert circles?
I'm not taking this one as well.
Perhaps Professor Robock or Eleonora?
I'm not sure what you mean open source. I mean, all of our work is open, and we try to make it available to as many people as we can. We wrote a book, we publish in the popular press, we have a website. So my concern is how do we get people to pay attention, not how do they get the access is there, but how do we get their attention? If you ask people what's the most important worry, it might be the price of food or the price of petrol or healthcare or some people write global warming, but nuclear weapons come way down on anybody's list because there hasn't been a nuclear war for 80 years and nobody's paying attention to it, even though there have been threats from Putin, but people didn't take him seriously. And so I'm just concerned that there has to be a use of a nuclear weapon to get people's attention. I don't want that to happen. But how do we get people's attention? And now that the New START treaty is over, and we have a rogue government in our country, people that want to start testing again and want to put more warheads on existing missiles, it makes it really scary.
Well, let's get other people in. Again, I can't believe I'm saying this, but maybe we just need to have pictures of puppies before and after nuclear war. How many puppies would a nuclear war kill? That maybe this is the way to, you know, stop putting that on TikTok. I'm not being entirely facetious, but there are other people with questions.
Yes, we have a question from Helena. Please feel free to unmute yourself and go ahead.
Yes, hi. This is actually Katarina Simonen. I'm using my mom's computer, so that's why it's Helena. I'm from Pagwash. So Dan and Alan, we met in Hiroshima. Hi. So this is my question was actually about how do we break the ice, because in Finland we have a very siloed atmosphere, and we really can't make the politicians hear us. We have the huge NATO fans and the politicians and the peace movement and the academia. I mean, we are organizing all kinds of stuff, and I'm really happy to invite you also to speak in our meetings, but these people don't come. So we actually have a big problem with how to make them listen, and I don't have an answer to this. But I wanted just to say that what we are trying to do here at the moment is kind of a step before the nuclear winter. We are trying to challenge the current level of civilian preparedness, because our shelters and the whole system, Finland is renowned for its civilian protection system, but it's still like Cold War stuff, long-range transboundary nuclear radiation preparedness type. So we are trying to now go and ask, what are you going to do when a nuclear bomb explodes somewhere? But this was rather a comment and a greeting to all of you, and I'll be happy to follow your projects and interact so we can support each other. Thank you.
Thank you. Any reflections on that?
So you've been waiting a while, Eleonora. I think you had something you wanted to.
Well, I seem to agree with Helena's reflections. I also have this question whenever it's kind of an informal research, talking to my peers about the situation or kind of trying to assess what the general public believes and thinks in this regard. It almost always feels like, even if there are a lot of open sources, as Professor Robock said, and books available, movies available, it kind of feels like everything is out of the hands of the general public. Like it's just lies within the government, and we normal people, even less when the people are not involved in academia or in this kind of discourse at all. It feels like it's out of their hands, like they are just subject to whatever the whims of their current government might want to do. And I feel like there's this belief that it's something too big to kind of be restricted in a more individual level. That's just what I've my perception of the situation in a more down to earth dialogue type.
I sympathise. We're in a similar boat. I think people going out and raising questions with parliamentarians, with decision makers. You know, what is your policy about? Have you thought about this? There's protests, of course, but the sad fact is, as far as we're concerned, these people think they know what they're doing, but they don't. Now, I saw a statement from the Finnish leader, and of course, with the appalling behavior of Russia, it's very easy to, well, let's build up our forces, and Finland certainly is. And the Finnish president saying, well, you can rely upon us, America, we will take care of the Russian bases in not far from the border, in Archangel and Murmansk in the Arctic. But of course, if you go around blowing them up, the amount of radiation, never mind the nuclear winter, but the amount of radiation you create from smashing open nuclear silos, nuclear submarines, itself is catastrophic. And I think bringing home those instances, but also nuclear winter, have you really thought through what's involved here? And I would simply say, well, we can't do arms control. We can't trust them. Well, we never trust the Soviets, and we still managed to get some great agreements that lasted a long time. So I don't think it's easy, but I think one has to deal with that. But I see there's some other people waiting, so I shall stop my blathering.
Yes, Anthony Rudolph has a question. Please go ahead.
Well, it's a sort of question and statement. In the good old days, quote unquote, of nuclear education and the freeze movement and so on, we could rely on retired military people who knew what they were talking about and were respected. People like Field Marshal Lord Carver and Lord Zuckerman. Okay, a scientist, not a military, but there are no. It's and the generation of whom the sort of last remaining members of that coalition, people like Bill Perry, there's not. We can't. There are no retired soldiers or sailors or airmen intelligent enough and concerned enough to speak out, are there? That's the question, really, and that's the.
I think it's sadly true. I mean, because Mountbatten name is in the news again for all sorts of disgusting reasons.
Yes.
I encourage people to think about, the series The Crown, which many people see, and the Lord Louis Mountbatten, covered in all his glory as a naval officer, as a World War II commander, and he of course said that deterrence is far too dangerous, and we have to have disarmament. So one is falling back on these ancient people and their now ancient statements. But yes, we have a shortage of the dissident military. The last one was my friend General Butler, who was the head of American strategic forces, and who got rid of thousands and thousands of nuclear weapons at the end of the Cold War, and who should, have as a debt we all owe to him. And he also denounced deterrence. But yes, we are bereft of such figures today.
Professor Robock, if you...
Can I add something?
Go ahead, please.
Conversely, the military are talking up war with the help of Boris Johnson and so on. People like this man Sheriff, Major General, or I'm not sure what rank he is, retired former senior NATO leader, who wrote a terrifying and very bad novel about 10 years ago, saying there would be a nuclear crisis around the end of the 1920s. And but the way to deal with it was building up your defenses. And he's one of the so-called offenses. He's one of the wrong kind of retired military. And there are people like one of the British ambassadors, ex-ambassadors to either USA or Soviet Union. It's either Braithwaite or
it's Braithwaite.
Is it Braithwaite?
Yeah.
He's a goodie, isn't he? He knows there's a problem.
He is quite good. But yes, we do need more. We need to find more ancient wisdom in the cupboard.
Yeah.
Well, we're coming up to our hour, Mona Lisa, and it's been a thoroughly interesting conversation, and really enjoyed the interventions. And Katerina will definitely be in touch to see whether we can break through some of the silences.
Thank you, Professor Plesch. Professor Robock or Eleonora, if you had any concluding remarks that you would like to share before we end today's call.
Thanks for your interest in my work. If you want more information, let me know. I have a web page which I'll also put in the chat, and I put a link to my book in the chat, and so you can. I'd really be interested in more ways to publicize this work and get people's attention.
Eleonora, over to you.
Thank you very much. I just want to thank everybody for giving me this occasion to work on this project and to listen to these very interesting comments. And I can't wait to see if we can take this project to further spaces and to bring it to even more people, hopefully.
I found your graph very interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing its publications.
Thank you very much.